Welcome everybody, my name is Paul. I'm a real estate professional in the western part of Virginia near Lexington. And I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about if you're a first-time homesteader and buyer looking for property. Virginia is one of the best states in the country to do homesteading because it's always been a way of life here in the state, and there's tremendous support for it in communities and in the economy and the type of machinery and soil and so on that's available here, and plenty of water. So I specialize in just rural real estate. I've had a cosmopolitan type of life. I've been to plenty of cities and traveled around quite a bit, but I chose the Virginia area to homestead. I'm a 69-year-old aging baby boomer, and I enjoy living in a rural life because it's more inexpensive and it is less stressful. And nowadays you can live near a reasonably small city like Lexington, Virginia, and you can have all the conveniences of hospitals, schools, and so on, and even colleges, but you don't have to be overwhelmed by the traffic and some of that stuff that goes along with it. So let's say you are looking for a homestead. I really suggest there's a number of things you should do. You should at least get yourself a good topographic map of the state. I know that they have good GPS navigating software now and so on, but nothing really has a detail and just a tangibility to carry with you, because some of the areas in Virginia do not have good cell reception anyway. So it's good to look at the maps like this because it has the topographic. It might show you where the rivers are in detail. It might show you where there's areas where there's a lower area, what they call bottomland near a river, and where all the peaks are and so on. So get yourself a nice map and familiar yourself with the document system online called the GIS. Every county in this country has one now. And basically what it is, I think it means Graphic Information System, GIS. But you can research it on Google. And if you go there, you'll find so much of incredible information about any property that's there. The tax ID number, the last sale, how much it was for, who the grantor was, what kind of zoning it's in, and on, square footage, and so on. Now, that's part of the information that you're going to need when you go look as a first-time buyer. You want to arm yourself with lots of information, all available information, because this is a really big purchase, buying a homestead, and you want to establish yourself, and maybe you're raising a young family. You might be there for 20, 30 years, and so on. So it's a very, very important task that you're going about. And there's a lot of really particulars about buying a homestead and rural property that I've covered in many of my other videos, including about wells and septics and fireplaces and zoning and property lines and dividing up land and so on. So go watch some of the other videos. Now, as a first-time buyer, make sure you also have some financial documents in place, because even if you find the ideal property the first time you go look, let's say you just look one day and you spend one whole day finding a property, and one of the 5 that you looked at is like, oh my God, I gotta have this. And then if you're armed with all the right information and financial strength, and maybe you have a blank check in your hand for the down payment, well, basically a escrow payment, usually about $1,000 or $500. You have yourself armed with all that information, and before you even go look at a property, you have an idea where the property boundaries are. You might even know more about the property than the realtor. Trust me, there are realtors in this business. Most of them are very, very good, but some of them are not familiar with some of the things that go on in the countryside. And if you ask them to help you buy a property out, and they're not familiar. Some people specialize in, say, condominiums or city properties and so on, but I'm not. I'm a specialist in the rural land investment and recreation type properties. So again, you have your financial information and your strength, your down payment, the knowledge in your head, what you were looking for. You got yourself a nice map, and you go out looking and try to narrow it down. As a first-time buyer, you can go all over the county looking for property. But if you narrow it down specifically, have a list of things in your hand that says, okay, these are things that I must have. Then these are things that I would like to have but not absolutely necessary. such as like a little patio or whatever, something, you know, a deck or pool or whatever. And then there's things that you definitely do not want. You definitely do not want a junkyard next to you or across from the firehouse or something like that, you see. So you have that little basic guideline, and you have your map, and you have the confidence. That's another aspect about buying. I have a video I made called Be a Strong Buyer. When you're armed with a lot of information and you have a strong knowledge of motivation and clarity of thought, then you're a strong buyer. So that when you finally find a property that you can work with, then you're ready to just make a move on it right away. And sellers love a strong buyer. If you had the equal price and one says, hey, I can close in a couple months, I got to sell this other house across town here, and you know, I might be delayed or something, and then you have the same price, but you're ready to roll. 30 days, we're in there, you see. So be a very confident and strong buyer when you go out looking. Know what you're looking for. And let's say you're on the edge about it. Maybe you're a little bit early. Maybe you're going to be looking in a year. You have sort of an idea. Okay, in that case, it's good to get a general idea. Travel to the location that you're thinking of looking in, and just explore it. Get to talk to the neighbors. Stop at little stores. I drive around all the time, and I stop at little stores out in the boonies places and say hello to people and see what's going on there. And you can learn a lot about a community, because it's not just the land and the topography that you want when you buy. You want to buy a community. You want to buy sort of an area that, like I said, in Virginia, there's a tremendous support for farming, agriculture, timber, living in a country land, hunting, fishing, having goats, chickens, having a campsite. All that kind of stuff is very, very common in the rural areas of Virginia. So please watch some of my other videos and get an idea of what the process is if you're a first timer, because the more knowledgeable that you are when you go talk to your realtor, and you might get a buyer agent like me. I've been a buyer agent, and you just help somebody look and you say, hey Kay, I'm working for you, not the seller now, and we're a team now, and I'll do a lot of footwork for you and a lot of research for you. That's another video I made about having a buyer agent that a lot of people who are first-time buyers do not know about, that they can have an agent that is actually negotiating for them, not for the seller. So there are a lot of questions that you might want to ask. So before you talk to your realtor, and you might want to ask them a little bit about the properties that you're going to go see. When someone comes and sits down with me and we're going to spend a day going and look at some properties, I'll sit down and I'll ask them questions, and we'll just kind of narrow it down, and we'll pick some really prime possibilities that might work for them. And then it's up to you, the buyer, to have some area in your search that you're willing to compromise a little bit, because you're likely to find a lot of variety in the country. You might have a home that just is a little bit smaller acreage than you wanted, but boy, is it sweet. It's next to a forest or something. And then there's another property that has like maybe even twice as much acreage, but there's some other aspects about the area, the neighbors or something, that you're just not comfortable with, or it's too far from town or so on. So you have to be willing to compromise at some point. Maybe you find this great property and it's just 5 or 6 miles, or roughly 10 minutes of country driving, a little bit further from your job. So you sit down with your partner, if you're buying together, or just sit down and think to yourself, well, you know, I'll be doing that trip to the job like 5 times a week, and if it's 10 minutes a day each way, then that adds up 20 minutes. Yeah, adds up to a fair amount of time. But if you really get something that you really love, then it's definitely worth it. You see? So I hope I've given you some really interesting and helpful information as a first-time buyer. Again, we'll summarize. You know the location, know the area, get your documents ready, be confident, be informed, get an agent on your side, and follow through. Once you make an offer, that's another thing. People don't understand the process, perhaps. Let's say you find that beautiful property and you sit down with your agent and say, okay, what's the agent going to need? He's going to need you to sign a few documents. I know, for example, in Virginia, there's a septic disclosure and a basic property disclosure that the buyers have to understand that this property is as its representative. The septic has been, there is one there and is permitted and so on. So there's these kind of documents that you want to sign. You might want to sign an agency relationship and have a buyer agent on your side. That's a simple document that you do. And you sit down and you make a goal of kind of where you're at. Like I said, look at the map before you go out browsing around. There are areas in Virginia where you go down a country road and you might end up where you least expect and not be able to turn around very easily. So just have a very clear idea overall. Do your research. And then once you do make the offer, they're going to ask you for basically an earnest money deposit. Okay, it basically is a small check. It's usually $500,000. That goes into escrow. It gets recorded, and then at the closing, when you buy the property, let's say it was $1,000, you put that in the escrow at the closing. Then that goes on your side toward the purchase. Okay, instead of putting a huge amount of money like on a down payment, they don't ask you when you first buy a house and you want to start the process of closing on it. They don't ask you for 20% or anything like that. It's usually just a nominal amount that says, okay, I'm serious about this property, I'm going to follow through. And then you put some criteria. Usually the financial terms is, okay, I got 10 business days to get this loan. It's really good if you have a pre-approved loan in your hand already. Usually it's good for about 90 days or something, and they lock in an interest rate for you. So you say, okay, well, here's my pre-approval letter, and here's my earnest money deposit, and I'm ready to roll, and here's my attorney's name, and I've signed my buyer agency agreement with you, so we're working as a team now. So now you wait. Now you got to get the inspections. If you want any inspections, it's in the contract where you have to either get the inspection yourself done. You can negotiate any of this, but generally speaking, if you want to have the septic tanks checked or you want to test the water, then that's your responsibility and you pay for it. And it's there's varying costs, but think about what you're investing in. You want to have the water checked because if you're looking back, if you didn't spend that few $100s to get the water checked, or it might not even be that much. There are areas in the country where you can take some water from a well down to the local county office and they'll test it for you. Maybe just a nominal amount of money, because they have an interest in knowing exactly what the water quality is. And if you bring a sample in, that saves them a lot of time. So now you know what you're doing. You know what the septic is. You know what the well is. You know where it is. Hopefully you want to have a termite inspection perhaps. There's a radon in some areas. There's radon. Radon can be ventilated. In Virginia, there's a certified inspector for radon, and they have to be approved and everything. And I think it's like $500, unfortunately. But if you do find radon gas coming up from the soil in a home, there's ways to ventilate it, okay? And generally, a well-ventilated house won't accumulate much radon, especially if it doesn't have a basement. In the countryside, if the windows are open frequently, generally speaking, the radon inside the house is going to be very, very low. So there's inspections that you may or may not want, and then you can negotiate with the seller. If something comes up on inspection, say, hey, we got to fix this little problem here. It's not as serious, but let's say there's a deck railing and it won't pass inspection because it's loose or something like that, or a board on the steps is loose. Well, then the seller has responsibility. In Virginia, the standard is up to $1,000 repairs before it starts to get into negotiating territory. So the owner of the house will say, okay, I'll fix that. It's going to cost a couple $100. I'm going to have a couple $100 to clean the chimney and a few other things like that. So there are a few things that you can negotiate if you actually have a certain contract where you must have a certain thing done. Then it could delay the sale significantly. It could cause some problems. For example, if you just cannot have any, well, mold is a common one. Mold is anywhere where there's moisture, mold can happen. Mold can be treated, can be gotten rid of. If it's a small spot, if you buy a house, why delay a house and cost $1,000 when you and some bleach in half an hour or so can clean up something like that. You see, so you have to decide where along the line you know, where you want to call it. I fixed a toilet one time on a sale because it was just leaking slightly. I went to the hardware store for $12, and a few half hour of my time I stopped it from leaking because that was going to be a serious problem if they came in and saw that there was leaking, because that was part of the contract there. They had to have it fixed. So anyway, I hope I've given some important information. There is a process once you start it, and be ready to roll, be ready on your phone, and the realtor may call you, say, hey, you got something come up here, or this is scheduled inspections, and if you want to be there during the home inspection, you can do that. So all these things, a win-win, negotiate, talk to your broker, agent, have them work for you, and move the sale along so you can go about your business and work and make the money to pay for it. So thanks again for listening. I hope to see you in many of my other videos. I have a website called virginialandowner.com and this YouTube site. Please like and share if you find this content interesting. Thanks again for listening.